The gaze of the other is not necessarily real, but it is a real problem. I, Ayaz Ali Khan,
And I, Bindu, welcome you all to this 2-day seminar on gaze. Our department, established in 1953, has significantly contributed to the intellectual growth of Delhi University and society at large, providing space for diverse ideas and thought processes. Today, we take another leap in the process to cultivate the intellectual growth of the academic community in this campus and beyond.
in the act of seeing there lies a tale of power and might, where the observer reigns casting shadows in the light. For in the gaze there lies but truth and untruth, both gentle and cruel. It is the perception of the others that dictate our perception of self. Now, I'm honored to introduce Dr. A. Sunita, a distinguished researcher based in Hyderabad. Her academic pursuits span across various fields, including minority politics, gendered migration, and sexuality and violence. Currently, ma'am is in the final stages of completing a manuscript focusing on Muslim political discourse in Telugu region. Dr. Sunita earned her PhD in political science from the University of Hyderabad and subsequently served as a fellow and coordinator at the Anveshi Research Center for Women's Studies from 2000 to 2022. She has contributed significantly to the scholarly community as a co-editor of notable publications such as Vegetarians Only, Telugu Muslim Stories 2015, Towards a World of Equals 2015, and A World of Equals 2022. Dr. Sunita's extensive experience spans over 25 years, during which she has been actively involved with various rights-based organizations and forums in Hyderabad and Telangana. We welcome you, ma'am. And now I would ask our HOD Professor Keshav, to please felicitate Dr. Sunita.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to introduce our chief guest, Dr. Karen Gabriel. Karen Gabriel heads the English department at St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. She's also the founder director of Center for Gender, Culture and Social Processes at St. Stephen's College, a hospitable academic space which curates courses and encourages research. She is currently the vice principal, in fact, the first woman vice principal of the college. She has published extensively on issues of gender, sexuality, cinema, representation, melodrama, and nation state, which are her core research interests. And her publications include Melodrama and the Nation, Sexual Economies of Bombay Cinema from 1970 to 2000, and the edited volume titled Gender Nation. She is currently working on a book on dystopia and one on homosexuality. She retains an abiding interest in the politics of visuality and technology. Her international fellowships and awards include 2021 Digital Fellowship at Columbia University, USA, European Union's International Incoming Marie Curie Fellowship, and postdoctoral fellowships for gender excellence at the Center for Gender Excellence at Sweden, among many others. I would now request Dr. Sujata to felicitate Dr. Karen Gabriel.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would like to make a futile attempt of summarizing the academic genius of a person whose literary contributions are extensive. Our very own Professor Keshav Kumar, the current HOD of the Department of Philosophy. His area of expertise include contemporary Indian philosophy, ethics, socio-political philosophy, philosophy of religion, cultural studies, continental philosophy, Dalit studies, and social movement. He has authored several significant books, including Jiddu Krishnamurti, A Critical Study of Tradition and Revolution, and Political Philosophy of Ambedkar, an inquiry into the theoretical foundations of Dalit movement, among others. To Sir's credit are numerous articles, national and international seminars and presentations. Sir has also chaired and acted as a member of several rigorous academic committees. Professor also has edited various books and contributed chapters to several others. I would request Dr. Ritu Jaiswal to please felicitate Professor Keshav. Thank you, ma'am. Now I would request Keshav sir to kindly propose the inaugural address of this seminar.
Good morning to everyone. I welcome you all for this international seminar on gays. Today we have very distinguished scholars. It is not only scholars and also activists. One is my friend, Dr. Sunita. Even her research work itself, it is a political theorization of the violence against the women. Rape. And after that, she is engaged with the very initial days in India, the very prominent women's research collectivity is there. One it is in Hyderabad, two are there. One is Anveshi and other is Asmita. The way the like-minded scholars they came together, they have formed a group such as the Anveshi Research Collective for the Women Studies. It is already established its name, and she was a convener for a long time, and also already somebody introduced the kind of the collections and issues involved, the way it's engaged with the gender and minority issues. And more than that, she's also a human rights activist. And other scholar is Karen Gabriel. Everybody knows in this space. The way Delhi University campus is known for the taking the by having in the front row for the leading the many of the women's struggles and other issues of the campus. And she needs no introduction here, and it is people are familiar with her work and also her presence in the most of the issues related to the students and gender issues and also other alternative politics. And today the department is organizing a national seminar. It is on the gays, the initiation of Dr. Jaiswal, Ritu Jaiswal, and also Dr. Sujata Absar. And you are aware of they introduced after we joined, we are all joined together. After they joined the department, and there's a occasion it is there for us to introduce the new courses. One such a new courses we introduced is the feminist studies. Also, even though outside philosophy discipline, it is the feminist movements also there, and also it is a different level it is there. But there is a departmental level, as a full-fledged courses are not there, papers are not there. The first time they introduced the feminist theory, not only feminist theory and also feminist film theory. And consistently they are teaching and also they introduce most of the students, not only Department of Philosophy, outside the department, and as interdisciplinary level, they attract the more students. And also in the stage of the where the formative age, they mold their brains and also one has to think about seriously and certain issues related to the gender. Definitely that credit goes to them on behalf of the department. Doesn't mean that other people, maybe other teachers also, many different level they're working, but as an institutional practice and also very systematically they came up with it. They're consistently organizing seminars, and this is also one such seminar. And this time that concept is gaze. Many people thought that it is gaze means something is a different word, or somebody misunderstood while talking of the pronunciation. Gaze means is about gaze, like that many people also ask. It's a simple word and all. Gaze means the look. How do you look at others? How do you perceive at others? You know, our root word of philosophy, not philosophy, at least Indian context, darsana. Darsana is nothing but where it is came from the perception. How do you look at the reality? And you know, in a discipline of philosophy, for us, perception is the prime source of knowledge and also the prime pramana and in generating knowledge. That is true, but never try to theorize not theorize, theorization. Lot of things might be there from classical time to contemporary time, but never try to look at the problematize the perception. Our perceptions are colored with prejudice, preconceived notions, and also very specifically to talk about it is the gender, caste, and race. All these kind of things it is will be there, but never try to look at the even now also people never try to look at the very lot of serious debates. Is there pramana? Is there this sabda pramana is important, or it is the perception it is important, or so many issues also there related to that one. They never to problematize the issue and all. How do you look at others? On what purpose? Who is looking at? We have enough literature. It is there before film. Of course, it is mostly the problem is started with the looking at the making the films and also film narratives. Prior to that one, there's a lot of literature. It is there. Not only just literature. If you look at the classical time to the contemporary times, the no the today the issue is that who is representing whom, and also from what is their credentials, and then the representation authenticity these issues it is came for recent time debate. For long time it is expected that the protagonist and also the people that they're presenting they're expected something like that. It is there the classical to the contemporary times. You know how women is placed, very particularly with the feminist movement. They problematized first time, and they tried to very particularly. They're not talking about the lot of theories, philosophy, or the place of women in a philosophy or in knowledge systems and all. The common sense level. How do you look at basic level? How do you look at others? And exactly there they identify the problems to the way it is involved, and it is mostly the literature from classical to contemporary times. To classical literature, of course, it looks like very religious literature, but mostly the subjects maybe it is a divine or whatever it may be, or class in contemporary. Even the subject, the way it is women, it is a make the central point where it is sees as a adoration or else a subject of wire, and also it is as a fetish, and also they expect all the the all kind of narrations. Thousands of pages has written in this country about the narration of the woman's body, and different levels, different ways, and different words are used, adjectives it is there and all, but never theorize. They never give the scope for the women to speak on themselves. And also if that problem anyway it is there and all, it is prerequisite for this thing. Literature is important, education is important, and also position is important. The canonization is not allowing them. The access to education is long back is negated. That's why we can't. The space is empty, and only they have to be seen in front of the others. It is only what they try to. There's no problem with the way one has to looking at others and looking at the problem is with that one. Our looks are accompanied by or prompted by the social norm, or it is the kind of whatever you try to talk about the kind of social norm, dhamma, or women, the role of women, the social functioning of the woman, where you try to locate and all, but very narrow. Not only narrow, much more violent and much more problematic. There also never women also never try to realize that one. They also have to feel that thing. You have to be prepared for the men. You have to decorate for them, how to please them and all. That way it is there till they're conscious about that one wood, what for, and why we have to be there. And then women talking themselves and all, the kind of exposing the kind of the prejudice and also why the kind of privileges for some people and all. And then the issues very came for the discussion when they're talking about themselves. We can speak about ourselves. Not only this one, the violence is involved. The everyday looks what we are trying to look at. Forget about the vulnerability kind of things and other it is there. The way you try to look at this thing, and specifically we are not recognizing the body, and also you are defining the other also one kind of identity, narrow down identity that they also feel that thing, the kind of propaganda, kind of literature, the kind of films it is there. They also feel that we have to behave like this. They are also tuned. Not only men, they were expecting that one, the expected roles where subordinated, subservient roles there's given, and where they can't feel and also reveal themselves what they are. This problem it is there, and at least it is because of the different waves of the feminist movement. It is there. One such occasion, it is also influenced by the Laura Mulvey. It is on 1975. It is a British film theoretician. She tried to make as a visual pleasure and narrate to cinema and narrative cinema. There she tried to problematize the gaze, that is a male gaze, and how male gaze it is, how it is about how women portrayed in cinema and how the character of women constructed in the film narrative. He argues that women are constructed in objectifying and also limited manner to satisfy the psychological needs of the men. In simple terms, this representation reflects the patriarchal society. By placing women in a subservient role to please the male spectator, female empowerment is secondary to male sexual desire and the patriarchy. In defining construct identity of women, it diminishes the potential of the woman, how women should look and act. It is this way you can, the kind of this thing, the way because of feminist movement and also the conscious women came forward and they're defining themselves, asserting themselves. There the problem, there it is extended not only to that one other level also. It looks like simply gaze. It is a normative term and also it is deconstructive term. Where is the way you try to look at it is the where it is the regular everyday kind of the way either looking at the other, then they try to make it as a problematized one way. One has to look at differently, and we define ourselves rather than somebody constructed ourselves and all. That process, it is not only moral act and also it is a political act. The same time, only single act, the way you are defining, where the way I want to project yourself, and also you not only the way I am defining, you expected others also have to be look like this. What the way you can't be reduce me to just as a wire object and all, where for your desire and all. It is objectifying some parts of the this thing. That kind of discourse it is also very much important. And there they try to totally change the discourse of the academics and all. It looks like it is the representation, authenticity, and also moral. Then that way they expose the shallowness of our academic, the shallowness of the philosophy. It is not the question of the why there is no women in philosophy. It is philosophical studies. You are reading from so many classical to contemporary times. Why there is no woman? It is there and all. Or history means even the wording also problem. His story and all this kind. Apart from that one, there is a serious demand. It is there and all. And the way they try to define the rule, the constructing the debates of the moral and political debates is the debates of the politics. Politics is nothing but way. It is about the emancipation and also liberation. The oppressive structure, where patriarchal structure, where they try to talk about, and they try to make it as a serious problem. The problem is more not only more than looks. It is gender. It is some sense it I talk about. Much more vulnerable problem. It is there and all. It is. The way the caste issue also there and all. Forget about in the at least women as a something like the attractive or to fulfill the psychological desire. It is there, but where other is the men, the where people earlier used to call as untouchables, unsaable, unapproachable. See, the words are Ambedkar used and all. You forget to see that thing. The fellow exists in front of you. Your existence is there. Forget about the bad faith, and also it is you are ignoring the other fellow. The fellow is exist and all. You see the how humiliating act here is there and all. You're not even recognizing that thing other fellow exists because that happened to be the the markers. How do you look at the people and who is he and where it is there, what kind of people and where it is this kind of people. There it is the humiliation. It is there. That exactly in this context it is there is not only recognition, not only forget about the distribution of the resources and economic kind of elevation and all. Not only redistribution of resources, it is also equally important recognizing the other. Recognition is important and all. Many of the people try to problematize the misrecognition. Not only how problem is involved with the misrecognition, it is not even recognition also equally problem. It is against the one's own individual dignity and also self-respect. That's why philosophy, when we're talking about philosophy, we have to be start from the basic. It is not forget about so many complicated theories, however meaningful statement you will try to derive out of it. More than that, it is the where dignity and self-respect. Our philosophy is to start from the ethical relations with other, and also dignity and self-respect as a philosophy. That should be the starting point in that process. When in this kind of debates, definitely the feminist discourses helped a lot, not only confined to the women issues, and also critical race theory, and also critical caste theories, and also one can look at the other kinds of vulnerabilities and problem. They demand now, the demand is that not to be looked at sensitive enough to the issues, or it is sympathetic to the issues. That kind of debate is no more. Now we're expecting that there should be empathy with others and all. There should not be, suppose you are expecting somebody means some other will be there and all. It is not required that one. This kind of, we should see is a different kind of discourse is very much important, and that our politics, our academic engagement should be start with that one. And I hope it is not only the here, is other many scholars also it is attending this one who are familiar with this kind of debates. I hope now it will generate some kind of new kind of initial debates in this field. It is not confined to the narrow term, not to just reproducing what Laura Mulvey said, how to ascend. If you check that one, you can find lot of things. You no need to explain and all. You can get lot of things, PPTs and other things in the Google search one can find out. We expect that one something more. It is not required anybody to theorize. You know it very well. Your life experience itself more tells you more about that one. Will come in so many kind of theoretical position. I hope academic engagement will be much more concrete and much more where mundane level one can take it and all. I hope that that level it is the seminar. I expect in the seminar will be it is definitely it is one such kind of initiation. It will be. I hope it will be successful event by igniting some kind of the debates in this direction, from taking from the very ordinary perspective. How do you look at other? How you expect others to think about you, and that way in the process we are asserting ourselves, we are divining ourselves, and also you are actually asserting with the dignity and self-respect. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. I will now introduce Dr. Ritu Jaiswal. Dr. Ritu Jaiswal has been teaching in the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi since 2015. Her areas of interest include social and political philosophy, gender studies, and media studies. She has delivered over 40 lectures at various national and international platforms and has a number of publications to her name. Among various publications, recently published works include Journalistic Responsibility in the Age of Commercialism, Injustice and Responsibility Relearning to be Human, published by the Council of Research in Philosophy, Washington, D.C. in 2020, and a Gandhian Solution to the Problem of Religious Intolerance in Rethinking Religious Pluralism, published by Springer Nature, Singapore 2021. She has supervised 6 PhDs, 1 postdoctoral work, and 6 MPhil dissertations, and has been conferred with the Gandhi Award from Gandhi Bhavan, University of Delhi. She has been a visiting faculty at IIM Rohtak in 2021 and 2023. She is the mentor of Minorities in Philosophy, University of Delhi chapter, and which is a international network of students which aims to address issues of inclusivity and minority participation in philosophy. I now request Dr. Ritu Jaiswal to introduce the theme of the event.
Thank you so much, Bindu. Uh, I would like to first of all thank all the speakers here and the audience and students. Uh, Whenever we think of organizing any seminar, it starts with the conception of it. And I guess it started when I started teaching feminist film theory. That students were wondering that what is this gaze, and whether when we are uh, discussing Laura Mulvey's point of view on male gaze, whether it can only work in one manner, where it is dominating, okay, where it is trying to objectifying the other person. So I thought that no, there should be more discussion around this concept, a discussion which can unfold various aspects of the gaze, and then with the help of few of my other students from the class who are very enthusiastic to discuss it more in depth, we thought of organizing this seminar. And then in that process, I'm very thankful to Professor Keshav and Dr. Sujata Roy here, that who immediately liked the idea and started working on it. And the speakers you are seeing here, they are like, so congenial that Dr. Sunita postponed her flight ticket to Hyderabad so that we can have a gaze here. Okay. And Dr. Karen Gabriel, I just requested her with one call, not even giving her enough time for this event, and she was immediately ready to do that. So that shows our commitment to academics, commitment to the cause, that we have to work together. Now, coming to the topic of the seminar, gaze is something which starts from the very act of looking. And when you look at others, then you're also showing some kind of power. It's a very common thing that people say that what's wrong if I admire someone for their beauty? Okay. Yeah, you are looking beautiful. You are looking awesome. Okay. These kind of comments are always welcome. It should be welcomed, I guess. And if a woman is saying, or if a man is saying that, why are you always commenting on me? Okay. They would say that you are looking beautiful. You should just be happy with this comment. Now, what is problematic with this kind of comment? And is it problematic always? That is the question. Okay. I would refer to what Mary Douglas has said, that the moment you try to define any concept in terms of its purity, okay, the moment you say that something is looking beautiful, you are at the same time defining what is not beautiful. Okay, and then this entire practice of being included under the category of beautiful starts happening. Everybody is starting making an effort to look beautiful, and all those people who think for themselves that they are not that beautiful will start feeling bad about themselves. And the same thing happens with reference to gaze, that if somebody is being gazed at, and if you are gazing at someone that has a power, okay, so the act of gaze should happen with some responsibility. It should not be as like, that, okay, you are looking beautiful and that is why I'm just commenting on you. The act of looking has a power, and it should come from the sense of responsibility. A very popular and well known philosopher, Sartre, has already discussed the debate around it, the discussion around it, with his notion of the look, that how the look of the other can make you feel very shy and ashamed and sometimes anxious of your own existence. So it's not like, that when somebody is looking at you, they're just looking at you without any reference, without any intention, but it has so much to do with your existence that it creates your subjectivity, which has been defined by Jacques Lacan, where he says, with the discussion on mirror stage theory, that the moment you have a look at yourself in the mirror, then you realize the subjectivity, the I, the ego. And at the same time, you become aware of the existence of you being looked at by the other. Okay. So the existence of others become as important as the existence of I is. At the same time, Michel Foucault has, with his very popular notion panopticon, discussed that how gaze could control your life, and it is not always necessarily very controlling in that sense that some political power is required for that. But everyone sitting here, we have the power to define how the other should be looking at and being looked at. So basically, everyone sitting here, if we own that power, then probably we will have to change the definition of the way women are looked at, the way marginalized communities are looked at, the way anyone, whether they are marginalized or not, are looked at. We have to discuss the notion of gaze in its entirety, so that our notion, our understanding of the concept of gaze is not just limited to one dimension of it, which is related to objectifying the existence of other and trying to dominate the other. I would like to mention here two other thinkers. First is Bell Hooks, very well-known author and thinker, who has tried to discuss the notion of oppositional gaze, and she has tried to bring in this concept in order to show that how you can deal with the gaze of the dominant, okay, by creating that sense of resistance in you, that whenever somebody is gazing at you with that power to dominate you, you will also have to participate in that in order to show your resistance, in order to change the meaning of that gaze. The moment you change the meaning of that gaze, then only you can change your existence. You can resist against your domination and your marginalization. And at the same time, another author, Derrida, very well known name, has tried to say that uh, all things, language is context dependent. Okay, so even the concept of gaze could be changed. It doesn't necessarily have to always be limiting and controlling. So with this seminar, and my main focus would be to look at the concept of gaze, and especially with reference to female gaze, that how a female too, this question is once again raised quite a lot, that if we have to have, if we are having male gaze, then what would be the opposite to that? What is good for women? So should we have female gaze instead, and then the power should be transferred into the hands of females, so they will start objectifying men? I don't know what will happen with that. Once women start objectifying men, will men be happy with that? Will women be happy with that? As N. Kaplan has raised these questions. But I think that female gaze is much more than that. Female gaze in itself can create an entire different notion of gaze, which will bypass the very understanding of objectification of the other for your own satisfaction of desire. Female gaze can be at the same time respecting the desire of women and all the other people as well as protecting the autonomy and agency of women. So I guess with this, with these words, I would like to thank all of you here for coming here. And this seminar is going to include not only the discussion on male gaze or female gaze, but rather so many other concepts which will be mentioned by Dr. Sujata Roy later. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ritu ma'am, for the vigorous conceptualization of the theme. Sunita ma'am, we are truly privileged to have you here today, and I kindly request you to enlighten us with your keynote address, shedding light to the profound insight.
Thank you very much for inviting me to share my thoughts on this extremely important theme of gaze and othering. I was, when Dr. Keshav was speaking, I was remembering our mid-90s discussion when sexual harassment law was coming into place. And we were making posters about what is it that degrades women, what is the degrading nature of this sexualizing gaze in the campus. That was when uh, there was no sexual harassment law, and we had an issue in the campus. And uh, as a group, as a student group, we were working towards, like, defining it at that point. So it is something that uh, this idea of the gaze and the othering is something that one thinks through, one has thought through. It is not my subject of research, definitely. I mean, in that focused sense. So I have today my talk will focus on how feminists have looked at Telugu feminist writing. Telugu feminist literature has actually looked at gaze and othering. So let me uh, try and share what I have. Uh, so your concept note and the introductions to the seminar raise the pertinent connections between gaze and othering that are critical to us both as intellectual communities which are seeking to build democratic culture, as well as in the larger scenario as Indians facing intense onslaught on our fledgling democracy, where there is a process of othering through majoritarian political formations. There is an overwhelming attempt to portray, in fact, othering as ideal and desirable, and even work these into the formal legal system, wherein we, as a civic body, actually look at each other suspiciously as aliens to each other, and aliens who need to be deprived of every human capacity and worth, undeserving of being treated as human. I'm not naming names, I'm not saying things, some things which need to be, you all know what I'm talking about. Nevertheless, the process of othering is not at all new in our society and culture, as all the speakers' introductions have uh, uh, elaborated. Misogyny, patriarchy, Brahmanism have all shaped our gaze over centuries, while colonialism, racism, and Orientalism have added to this over the last 2 centuries. Now, in a context where othering is being formalized, made to appear as normal, and is threatening to become normalized and an unquestioned reality, I thought it would be important to remember that these multiple forms of oppressive gaze have been consistently named, challenged, and subverted by the oppressed. To tell us, they have told us that normal, what we consider as normal, cover layers of oppression. They have redirected our attention to the way in which our gaze positions each other as oppressors and the oppressed. They have told us there is an essential relationality to our identity as human beings. And this common identity has to be consistently recovered from multiple forms of oppressive gaze. Let me begin where I began my journey as a political being with the feminist perspective that taught me that much of the alienation that I experienced growing up was due to the internalization of the patriarchal gaze about female body, experience, natural destiny. I'll be using, as I said, most of the Telugu feminist writings in this. So, one of the things that I want to bring to you is the poem by Telugu feminist writer Jayaprabha. It's called Chupulu, Stairs, which describes the common gaze that women are subjected to at every point in their life on the street, in the offices, or in the school, which you all know as sexual objectification. In a much of our popular culture, to be desired by men in general forms a major constituent and part of the identity of women's worth and life. To be desired by men is something that women themselves desire. Uh, the internalization of this patriarchal gaze that Bell Hooks has talked about shapes women's perception of their own worth. By naming this gaze as sexual objectification, this is a poem that was written in the 80s. Jayaprabha subverts this patriarchal view. Listen to her poem where she describes this gaze as disgusting and degrading. It's called Stairs, being translated by Venture Narayan Rao. Needle sharp stairs from two eyes land on these lumps of flesh and roam freely about. Liar stairs that do not dare look into my eyes but crawl like larvae on my body. Eyes rich and poor, young and old, stare at women alike, signaling the hunger of the drooling dog, the ugly grab of a wolf. They haunt my dreams. In the dense jungle, I cannot tell light from darkness. There is no escape from these stares. On the road, in the bus, in the classroom, they chase my step, snapping at me here and there. These poison fangs knife me. I feel scared. I wish I could fly or vanish into the void. I have taught my eyes to stare back, equally sharp, stares for stares. That is how I wage my war now. These cowardly stares that cannot look me in the eye flee to the underworld. How I long for the day when not only eyes, but the whole body of a woman bristles. Now, she was not alone in talking about the objectification and of the uh, female body. There is a Telugu feminist writer Olga who wrote a set of stories about the way female body was fetishized in culture, where certain attributes of the body actually come in to stand for womanhood as the feminine essence. The titles of her short stories are revealing in themselves. They're called Sita Jada, Mukku Pudaka, Kallu. Sita Jada is a long plait, long hair that is supposed to be the desirable in women. Mukku pudaka is the nose ring, and kallu is the there's this like certain kind of eyes are supposed to be most desirable with women. So the collection of attributes that define the womanhood meant for a generation of Telugus. Now, of course, they're replaced by long legs, short tops, vacuous look. If you go by the Telugu movies, uh, so Volga calling attention to this gaze that determined women's relationships with men and with each other, more importantly, with each other, appropriately called this anthology Rajakiya Kathalu, that is political stories. That there is nothing that is which is so natural about it. There is nothing that is given that is about this process of making women and men into these beings, right? For most women, irrespective of their qualifications and capacity, home and family are made into a naturalized reality. She needs to exist and live for the others by becoming a dutiful wife and a mother who is at the service of the family. It is chosen on the basis of a class, caste, gender appropriate criteria by the native family. So, kitchen is idealized and cooking is something one is expected to acquire naturally as cisgendered women, because women are supposed to be natural housewives. They are inclined to child rearing. They are inclined to be like cooks. And this is a reality that Telugu writer Vimala overturns in her poem called Vantillu, which is kitchen. Describing her mother's life, this was written again in 1990. She reorients our gaze to take note of what this naturalized vocation hides. This is like a long poem, I'll cut it short. I remember the kitchen's flavor upon flavor, a mouth-watering treasury, pungency of seasonings, and the aroma of incense from the prayer room next door. Each morning, the kitchen awoke with the swish of turning butter, the scraping of scoured pots, and in the center, the stove, the fresh washed with mud, painted, bedecked, all set to burn. We played mother and father in the magic of the magic world of kitchen that trapped our childhood in its spell. No longer the playground of the grown-up girl, now trained into kitchen. Like all mothers and mothers' mothers before her in the kitchen, she becomes a woman right there. Our kitchen is a mortuary. Pans, skins, gunny bags, crowded like cadavers that hang amid clouds of da- damp wood smoke. Mother floats, a ghost here, a floating kitchen herself. Her eyes melted in tears, her hands worn to spoons, her arms spatulas that turn into long frying pans and other kitchen tools. Sometimes the mother glows like a blazing furnace and burns through the kitchen, pacing restless caged tiger, banging pots and pans. How easy, they say. The flick of the ladle and the cooking is done. No one visits now. No one comes to the kitchen except to eat. Come, let us clear out our private stuffs before our daughters must step solitary into these kitchens. For our children's sake, let us destroy these. Breaking the isolation to form collectives, sharing the experiences, form the pathways out of the confines of private life, and politicize the experience of women as socially constructed and simultaneously devalued. Such a devaluation, the Dalit movement pointed out, was essential to the maintenance of caste hierarchy, where Dalit bodies, food, culture, history, and politics is consistently sought to be reduced to the Brahminical gaze. Dalit feminist writer Vijay Bharati, excavated the figure of the spurned and demonized women in our mythology, such as Surpanaka and Tataki, to demonstrate that they were women who defied and who did not agree with the agenda of the expansion of the imperial kingdoms that are there. Like the village deities and the small goddesses who refused to submit to the local sovereigns and sacrifice their lives, the figures of Turpanaka and Tataki tell us the fate of the women who did not submit to imperial rule. This reoriented our perspective on our mythological women and told us that the consistent rebellion and refusal to submit of the women of the subordinated communities, subaltern communities. My friend Gogu Shamala's short story Tataki brought the mythological and the contemporary together to tell us of a young Madiga woman in her teens. Given the charge of this story, Shamala says is based on her sister's story. Given the charge of watering her fields, she is confronted by a landlord who wants the entire water to go to his fields. When her spirited efforts to irrigate her family land is sought to be thwarted by the landlord through sexual assault, through an attempted sexual assault, the, the protagonist of the story decides to kick the landlord where it hurts the most. The similarities between Shamala's Tataki and mythological Tataki, who defied the attempt of the Brahmin Vishwamitra to take over the forest, is unmistakable. What Dalit feminist writing gave us was to challenge the caste patriarchal gaze of Dalit women as always already sexually abused, or victims who needed to be uplifted through patronizing reformist narratives, either of the Savarna men or the Savarna women. Another friend, Vinodini, her short story, Priyudevare, which is Who's My Lover, casts a sharp eye on the inherent casteist misogyny around marriage, where when Dalit women are involved. This story depicts her relationships or the attempts, the marriage proposals that she gets, the protagonist gets from three men. While this one is a liberal Savarna who wants her to hide her caste when he meets her family. The second one, the leftist progressive, sees the marriage as an exercise in uplifting her. And the third, a Dalit progressive man, wants her to be a housewife to befit his status as a respectable man in the society. In each of these, Vinodini brings to the fore the specific gaze that is shaped in a specific ideological frame that denies her own integrity, her history, and her politics. Just as Dalit literature with strong feminist voices brought in a perspective that subverted the Savarna gaze to reclaim the voice, history, and culture, thereby remaking what is political, redefining what is political, the Muslim literature in Telugu after 1990s it was reborn or born with voices, feminist voices such as Shah Jahan. The birth of this new literature in the 1990s marked by Khader Muhyiddin's poem Kuttumacha. It's called a birthmark. It inaugurated a new wave of Muslim writings, turning the gaze backwards, asking as to why Muslims are always already backward, unpatriotic, anti-national, or whatever they do or they do not. This was written in 1990. Part of the poem, I'll read. My religion is a conspiracy. My prayer meetings are a conspiracy. This is also translated by Velcheru Narayan Rao. My religion is a conspiracy. My prayer meetings are a conspiracy. My lying quiet is a conspiracy. My attempt to wake up is a conspiracy. My desire to have friends is a conspiracy. My desire to live is a conspiracy. My ignorance, my backwardness, a conspiracy. If I marry, it's a conspiracy. If I have kids, it's a conspiracy. Shahjahana, who identifies as a Dalit Muslim, as a Dudekula Muslim. Dudekula is a caste that is in between Hindu and and she is not an exception. There are a set of writers who were from the 1990s were writing both as Muslim and Dalit with Dalit identity. Shahjahana, Khaja, Yaqub, and there are others. She proclaims herself to she reclaims she takes that identity which is thrown at her as a spurned identity and declares herself a Ladakhi, a woman who owns the slur against her to proudly say, yes, I am a woman from the low caste. I am a woman from the Dudekula. And I will not apologize for who I am. Her first novel, partly autobiographical, that has come out in 2021, seeks to portray her own life. It's semi autobiographical and semi fictional account. But it's an autobiographical novel. She portrays, she sets herself up as a model, as a role model. Ap- Her life, her partnership, which she shares with her poet writer Saida, a partnership which is based on literature and political life, a political partnership without children, a life dedicated to writing and politics. It shakes the reader who reads this, whose common sense attunes because as common sense is like that to take love and she needs to be on, she needs to take care and she needs to come up in life. Now this is a woman who says, no, I don't want any of this. She has a PhD, she has everything. But she says, no, this is not the kind of life I want. I don't want a middle class career. I don't want this. I don't want, but I want to write. This is my writing is my vocation. Writing is my life, and I want to live like this. I want to write poetry. I want to write novels. I want to write this. I want to politicize each of the things that is happening. I want to list things that is happening to me. So it shakes the reader whose common sense attunes her to think that this is not the kind of life that a regular woman should live. That and says yes, the regular woman can live a radically different life, which is not domestic, which is not oriented towards the people, which is political. And it leaves the reader with a discomfort. And I think that's what Radharani achieved. In brief, I want to say that while the patriarchal, Brahminical, colonial gaze is part of the process of subordinating different communities to othering, the oppressed do not remain passive, have not remained passive. They occupy these platforms, they return the gaze, they name and politicize the process of othering and re-establish connection between themselves and those who are others. Thank you for this. And
Thank you, ma'am, for the very insightful. I would now request Dr. Karen Gabriel, our chief guest, to address you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I want to begin by thanking the Department of Philosophy, um, with which I have had an on and off association for several years now. These are familiar faces, and the support of Professor Keshav in organizing this very important conference, Ritu and Sujata for their presence in their intellectual presence in it, and for inviting me to be a part of these deliberations. So um, it was so enjoyable to hear Sunita speak, to hear everyone actually before me speak. But after a long time, I heard a lot of poetry that I am a teacher of literature, a lot of poetry that resonates with me so deeply. So it was a true pleasure, and also to the many important points that were glossed by Professor Keshav and by Vicky. I will not repeat them. I will do something slightly different now, since they have covered a lot of the ground that one normally covers very adequately. I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to begin with an incident, and then make ask a series of questions and intersperse these questions with some observations, some deliberations of mine. The first is that we are all of us, I think, in part of social media. So all of us, I think, will be aware of an incident yesterday where a young American airman set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in the United States, and he shouted "Free Palestine" as he was burning, and he eventually succumbed to his injuries. Um, this was a kind of a spectacular moment that he staged to make an important political point about what is happening, which uh, very interestingly is on our social media feed from moment to moment. As some commentators have remarked, this is the most documented genocide in the history of humankind, and yet the one that is most least responded to in terms of international state response. Notwithstanding the ICJ, opinion on the matter and the judgment and the instructions that have been given and so on, the genocide is continuing. So that is one incident that I want to gloss, where somebody who finally could not take being part, he said, I cannot be a part of this genocide, and he set himself on fire. And it's a spectacular image. Most of the images available on social media are censored. So, they are filtered out. They filter out the burning body. Um, the other, event I would say that I would like to draw your attention to are the over 11 lakh tribals who are in jail, in prison, and and they are out of sight. Shall we say they are out of sight? So imprisonment is a way of putting people out of sight as much as anything else. In his introduction to me, Professor Keshav noted that I am, active in all sorts of kinds of politics, and indeed true that a lot of my thinking derives from the tension between the state and its citizens. My questions today then are of a specific kind, and they pertain to the nature of the gaze itself in the context of this kind of exercise of interstatal power. So I think that now, with of course the explosion in the digital media, and also in the context of what we understand to be transnationalizations, we even while we think of states as having their own legitimacy and being, in that sense, contained bodies, we also think of a huge transnational elite. We think of the transnational nature of politics. We think of transnational circulation of images, of capital, and so on and so forth. And of course, the structuring then of our gaze. Most people, I think this is also being filmed. This is a mediated event in that sense. It is in the hybrid mode. And it's so convenient to have things in the hybrid mode. But I think many of us also exist in the hybrid mode. Um, we we are always mediated by our phones. Even I have my phone here, but this is to keep it quiet. I didn't want it, buzzing while I was part of this very important event. But we all are forced, in a sense, into a hybridity. At least people, no, and I mean all. There are some of us who voluntarily ascribe to this hybridity. We may take selfies, we may expose ourselves to the gaze in different ways. We may want to be looked at. We may mediate the ways in which we are looked at. We can decide what kind of lighting, what kind of filter, what moment. It's accidental, but it's not accidental. And so we mediate the ever multiplying images of ourselves that are available photographically, for instance. Um, and that is a sort of voluntary way in which we have this kind of hybrid existence. For teachers, particularly now as things are becoming clearer, teachers might also have to be uh, in a hybrid mode, and this hybrid mode, of course, is something that we adopted during COVID, but it now might become a more or less established way of being with the other, or being with one's in the context of thinking of the student as the community that we exist with. Um, there is another kind of hybridity which I want to gloss. One, it is a kind of the hybridity that is in continuation with the kind of hybridities that I've been speaking about, the continuity between technology and the human being. Now we have nanotechnologies, we have all kinds of things that have come to the surface. I myself use pair of spectacles. I can't read very well without them anymore. But people have pacemakers, people have artificial joints, and so there has always been an intersection between the human self and the technological world. And there are important ways in which the human self and the technological world have sometimes fused. So those are kind of practical fusings, and I have spoken about a different kind of fuse in the context, of this, um, which is the way in which we succumb, if you like, if we succumb to technology. Um, I think in a day or two, those of you who are more aware can please correct me. Um, um, the WikiLeaks person, Assange's hearing is coming up, and he will, if he is extradited to the US, be sentenced to 175 years in prison for um, alerting people to the ways in which wars are structured. Um, Now it's quite interesting. I've given us some examples of the ways in which there is the omnipresence use of technology, but there are certain guiding principles, evidently some guiding principles which structure who can be the subject and who should be the subject of this technology, and in what terms this gaze must um, be structured. The problem with WikiLeaks, of course, is that Assange accessed what were called secrets. This was all available quite easily. It's easy to hack, and that is the other interesting thing about technology. We think that we're moving to a safer and safer world. We're actually moving into a more and more fragile world. So it was simply a disclosure of secrets. Now, the thing with disclosure is that there is the other aspect of it, which is secrecy. And that is a fundamental aspect when it comes to the question of gaze. All our gadgets, all our PDAs, we know are pretty porous. We know that there are data leaks all the time. We've heard about them from the Supreme Court. We know about it, ourselves. You have a conversation, and then 2 minutes later, you get an ad. If you say, "Oh, today I feel I put on a bit of weight," 2 minutes later, you'll get an ad saying weight loss, this, that, and the other. So in other words, one is being subject to, without one's knowledge, to a continuous gaze. Now, this gaze is a multifarious gaze. It is not simply the gaze of the state. It is the gaze of companies. It is the gaze of markets. It is the gaze of various kinds of surveillance bodies which have control of populations in mind. So the gaze has always, in a sense, as the speakers previous to me remarked, the gaze has always, in a sense, had an element of control in it. Somebody, Lisa read a poem called Stare. Ritu spoke about the nature of the stare and the discomfort when you are under scrutiny openly. But what happens when, to extend Foucault's idea of the panopticon, you are under scrutiny but you don't know it, or you are under scrutiny but you cannot see that you are under scrutiny, but you remain under scrutiny? Questions pertaining to behavior, questions pertaining to how the self may form. Professor Keshav spoke about the relationship between the self and the other, and how the self comes into existence. And the self, of course, always comes into existence in a processual way. It is not a final thing that is just simply there and available, but it is something that gradually comes into existence. So, how do we form ourselves when we are, and one would say, arguably always spectacle. How do we monitor our own behavior? And we do. I saw while coming one board saying you are the CCTV surveillance. You know, in college there are so many signs you are under CCTV. So what am I supposed to do then? You know, uh, but you do things. There are some people you don't speak to then in a corridor, but you take them to a room and speak to them. There are certain things you won't do, with yourself. There is so many things. This kind of self censorship we can see on the part of individuals, of course. We see it on the part of communities. One of the reasons why I mentioned we have a the tribal population, particularly in the central belt of India, is because there is kind of a paradox there. On the one hand, large numbers of them are imprisoned, or sometimes they disappear. And on the other hand, we know that there are drones circling all the time. In the context, for instance, of the farmers' struggle that is going on just at the borders of Delhi, Delhi has become a fortress. I don't know why, because access to a city um, should be open, but and access to people who provide us with food, without whom we would not be sitting here. We would just be trying to dig the earth and you know eat grubs or cultivate something for ourselves. But um, what one realizes is while they are invisibilized on the one hand, there is no media coverage of them. At the same time, there are drones that are flying above the protesting farmers all the time. So um, this is not then just a male gaze. It is not a female gaze. It is not even a phallocentric gaze. This is surveillance gaze. And I think at some level, one can think of it as a gendered gaze, definitely, because I think that the movers and the shakers remain men. Although somebody told me at a recent conference that one of the pioneers of surveillance technologies is a woman. But, you know, I think one has moved beyond the idea that gender is about simply, on biological sex. Um, but I think that what one must think of is uh, the nature of the game, a type of relation that it establishes with the self, with each of us, the kind of relation we establish to ourselves, and the possibilities then of resistance to this gaze, when this gaze, in some senses, invisibilizes itself while it is always visibilizing you. Um, so that's one, sort of set of points. Another set of points that take me about 10 minutes. Another set of points is about what has been remarked on earlier, which is what conceptual framework we bring to bear. And this point I'm going to put as a slightly provocative way, which is uh, how, how is the I tied up to our conceptual framework? Or, in other words, if we do not have the conceptual framework we have, would we still see the things that we see? It's a very fundamental question. So, in other words, we think then about the nature of the I itself. And it is in the context of this that I want to talk about the mediation of the I. Sometimes you have this experience every day. You're looking at something, but you're not seeing it. Your mind is somewhere else. Somebody may say, why are you looking at me? And sometimes actually you're not even looking at that person. You're looking at them, but you're not seeing them. and you're because you are actually looking inward somewhere into yourself, into your own mind. Now, um, this is one way in which we can think about um, the distinction between a naked eye, if you will, uh, while bearing in mind always that we see through a conceptual framework. As Professor Keshav was saying, whether this is gender, whether this is caste, whether this is religion, whether this is a sexual orientation, there are conceptual frameworks that are operational from the moment we enter into language, and it is these conceptual frameworks that we negotiate all the time as we come into existence as thinking, conscious, ethical, active, agential beings. We do it all the time. But in addition to this, I think we think about then the mediated eye. And when we are thinking about the mediated eye, we think of a few things that I just want to gloss. One is, certain ways of seeing. There can be darshana, as was very rightly pointed out. There can also be the othering gaze. There can be the gaze that admits nothing except what is same, or the gaze that eliminates difference. I would say, think of this as fundamentally imperial gaze. And I want to argue that part of systems of gaze control, systems of surveillance and control of visibility is a highly imperial project. It ties up to who will see what, on what terms, who will exist how, and on what terms. So we're not talking simply about practices of um, colonial occupation, but we're thinking about an imperial impulse that is embedded now in omnipresent technologies. And so you have the idea of a kind of a totalizing, the sense of a totalizing, I don't know, Big Brother, what you would call it. Big Brother still it doesn't do the job because it refers to a single entity almost. But what we're thinking about is actually a huge um, body or a huge set of complicit agendas that are being served by this. Um, so my question really is, how do we understand the links between the world, between vision, between formal mediation and technology? Um, and I want to just refer to one important practice. I'm from literature, and the Romantic poets, which I'm sure you all know, from Kant onward, and Schilling and Scheller and people like this spoke about, what was involved in the Romantic movement. But the Romantic poets, some thought it a bit silly. That they wanted to, of course, retreat from the city into the countryside, but also capture what they thought was a lost innocence. And there were also lots of tropes that refer them to childhood and moving back to childhood, becoming more childlike, adulthood as a time of corruption, childhood as a time of innocence, and so on and so forth. Whether you're looking at Keats or Coleridge or Blake or any of them. But I think what is so important in that insight is that there is a very sophisticated understanding of the need to renew the gaze. In other words, there is a suggestion that unless you renew your gaze, you will go blind. And blindness here, not a literal, but as a metaphor for the inability to see. for the, we develop with age. Some people develop cataract. It is a film over the eye. So we can think about familiarity if we don't question, if we don't look properly, if we don't challenge the term, we can develop a cataract of familiarity. You just nod your head, you just nod your head, you not just nod. And that becomes then that film of familiarity actually then breaks your vision. And one of the achievements of that self immolation that took place yesterday is that everybody was shaken. And interestingly, not because another Palestinian died, but because an American soldier died, saying that I would now experience what it feels like to be burnt by bombs that are being supplied by the US. And that attempt to break out of a familiar, overwhelming, hegemonic discourse about things is what was so significant. Um, so my sort of last few remarks are that it is absolutely necessary to gaze. It is absolutely necessary to look back. It is vital to stare back into the camera that mediates us from moment to moment. This is an active mediation that we have all some control over, some control over, but not this. With the CCT cameras, and now as increasingly other kinds of technologies become available, face recognition technology is become sort of mandatory almost now at the airport. We become identified, and I think it's very important to realize this. Not simply, we don't become identified as individuals. We become identified as populations in need of control. So, the aim behind the anonymous God's eye in the sky upon all of us is not to protect us, it is to protect itself from us. And so I will end with an appeal that we should all look back and not, slaves were punished for looking at the master in the eye. So we should not bow our heads, we should not avert our gaze, but we should look straight on and find again our agency to be fully, essentially human. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for providing us with a nuanced lens of gazing at the concept of gaze and also the world around. And now, uh, I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed mentor, Dr. Sujata Roy. Ma'am has been serving as an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Delhi since January 2015, bringing her wealth of knowledge and experience to the academic community. Prior to this role, she held the position of Assistant Director of the Regional Center of Urban and Environmental Studies in Lucknow. Dr. Roy's professional journey also includes significant contributions as an environmental consultant for national level projects, collaborating closely with consultation institutions like World Bank for over 3 years, with a scholarly focus on environmental ethics, applied ethics, and gender studies. Ma'am has made notable contributions in academia through her numerous articles published in reputable journals, exploring the intricate intersections between environmental consciousness, religion, and gender perspective. Recent publications include Environment, Consciousness, and Sri Aurobindo, Learning from the Present. Where does the privilege of veganism come from? Highlighting her expertise in the field, Dr. Roy's dedication to academia extends beyond research, as she actively participates in national and international conferences and diligently supervises PhD dissertations. Her exemplary contributions have been recognized through prestigious fellowships like Indian Council of Philosophical Research Fellowship. Currently, ma'am serves as the convener of the Gender Champion Committee and holds an advisory position on the Delhi Pollution Committee in New Delhi. With great reverence, we now invite Sujata ma'am to share her insights and wisdom with us.
Thank you, Ayaz. Thank you so much. That was actually very humbling. So, okay, now so I have been asked to give the concluding remarks. We have been listening to our erudite speakers for last 1.5 hours. So I'll briefly discuss what has been discussed in the session. Now we all know that the concept of gaze, it encapsulates more than the visual perception. It embodies a complex interplay of power dynamics, social constructs, and identity formation, as was discussed by Professor Keshav, and of course originates from the word looking or staring intently. But the gaze signifies not just the idea of seeing, but also being seen. It entails a relational dynamic where the one who gazes exerts a form of power over the one being looked at, sharing perceptions, identities, hierarchies, and the gaze is not really confined to individual interaction, but extends to broader societal structures influencing representation, discourse, and power. We heard about elaborate discussions on this by Dr. Sunita, and the notion of gaze, as Ritu discussed, it can be related back to what Sartre says, that if somebody looks at you, are you comfortable with the look? Carrying the word forward, even Simone de Beauvoir discusses this in her Second Sex, where she says women is the oppressed sex and internalizes the objectifying gaze of men upon them and do not have the power to return the gaze. In the division of the sexes, man is the subject, the transcendent, and the women remains other. And from here, this is also the concept of othering that we have been discussing since morning. And carrying the work forward, we have heard about Berger's contribution to it. Berger's influential book, Ways of Seeing, partially prepares the ground for the development of theories and gaze. And he was one of the pioneers who has worked in the area of feminist film theory. And Laura Mulvey goes ahead. She was a cinema theorist and popularized the masculine gaze in the feminist theory in her work, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, where she has talked about voyeurism and narcissism. But the structures of voyeurism and narcissism are both geared towards the pleasures of male audience. And the female viewer has no other option but to identify with the male gaze or adopt a marginal role or maybe a masochistic viewing positions. Consequently, we see that there was an advent and a lot of feminist activists ranging from theorists to filmmakers have tried to create a female gaze and developed a visual pleasure for the female audience. Is it possible? Can there be a female audience? We see questions, when there is a question of oppositional gaze and there are social reactions to only women being the object. So we also see questions of black women's gaze and lesbian gaze being part of the discourse. Moving ahead, of course, not directly related to feminist film theories and gaze, but we have also heard about panoptic gaze. Dr. Gabriel went on further to discuss how there is yet another gaze called surveillance gaze, where all of us are, a victim, a subject, an object of this surveillance gaze. So, in the next few days, the different papers that will be read out will delve into the areas of oppositional gaze, male gaze, problems of objectification, redefining masculinity through the female gaze, questions of race and the visibility, as discussed by Professor Keshav, deconstructing gaze in anti-caste films. Is it possible? Concept of Brahminical gaze in Indian context, and also whether Adivasi encounters, can it be counted as gaze? Carrying ma'am's discussion further, digital gaze and how it can turn into a not only panoptic but a surveillance state we are all very well aware of. So we understand that yes, there is an imperative for change. It rests upon a very steadfast commitment to dismantle the power structures that uphold the male gaze while simultaneously amplifying the voices of those who enjoy the oppositional gaze or who have been part of the oppressed gaze to subvert these very structures. An analytical framework of intersectionality will be required to address the issue of race, caste, disability, sexual objectification, religion, class, and that can be a powerful method or tool to unpack the so called oppressive framework and develop a narrative on the gaze. So, the next 2 days, we look forward to very engaging discussions with our speakers. We have some very illuminated, erudite speakers for the next 2 days, and the seminar, the international seminar, is going to be held in an online mode, an offline mode. It will be a blended mode, which makes it very significant, as we just heard from ma'am. And I'm once again very thankful to the guest speakers who have taken out time and have managed to be here. Not only cancelled or postponed your trip, but you've come here, and that has actually set the tone for the next days. And I'm sure the research scholars not only benefit from these discussions, but they'll carry forward in the research work. Thanks to everyone, all my research scholars, my colleagues who have taken out time and are present here, and look forward to any discussion.
Thank you so much, Sujata ma'am. And now we'll take a 5 minute tea break, and you all can go to the research gallery, have tea, but then reassemble in 5 minutes for the academic.